So, hello students, I guess you are fit and fine at your place, right? So, let's start today's class, okay? So, what you have to do, students, I'm going to show you some images. You have to tell me the name of those objects, okay? So, firstly, let's see. You have to identify the name, okay? So, first I have, this is a, yes, this is a scale, right? And second, I'm going to show you one more. Second, which is in front of your screen. Yes, what is that? Yes, it is a duster. Very good. So this is a duster. Very good, students. So students, you are thinking why ma'am is showing these images to us, right? So students, don't worry, I'm going to tell you. And so according to that, we have an activity related to these objects, okay? So these objects which I have in my hands, okay? So we are going to do with these objects an activity. Let's see what is that activity. So you have to sketch the shape of the following articles in your notebook. So these are the following articles. So let's see. First is a scale. Second is the duster. Okay. So students, I will draw these shapes on the whiteboard and you will draw these shapes on your notebooks. Okay. So let's go with first scale. For the scale, place it completely so that you will not allow to free to move. Okay. Now we have next, we have a duster. For the duster, keep it tightly, right? So that way you will not. Okay. So students, I can draw it. Students, do you find that these shapes are there which are different? Right? They have different boundaries. One are the circular, right? One are something else. So students, do you find that? One more image I have for you students. This is Anna Caesar. Okay. So let's do for this also. Then we will talk about more. Okay. For the Caesar, let me draw. Places completely. Okay. So students, I have drawn the images one more for you, that is for the Caesar. So students, do you find that these three objects are there which have different boundaries or same boundaries, different boundaries, yeah, distance, shape is there? Yes. Do you consider these states of matter which category? Are they solid, liquid, gases? Yes, very good. These are the solids. Very good, students. So basically students, we are going to discuss about the some properties of solid state. Okay. So this is our topic of discussion which we are going to discuss, that is properties of solid state. Okay. So students, let's talk about more. Solids have different shape at distant boundaries and fixed volume. So whenever we draw for the duster, for the scissor, for a scale, we get definite shape, right? We get definite shape as well as distant boundaries. So if I draw for this scissor again, so look it carefully, okay? So you have to place it perfectly because boundaries you have to draw it, so that's why. So students, now I have drawn for this scissor. Now let me draw for this scale again also, okay, for you. So students, when you draw it, 1 minute, it is become movable, so that's why. So students, when you draw for the scale, do you find it out the scissor and the scale have distant shape, right? They have their own distant shape and distant boundaries also, right? And you can consider them these having some fixed volume, right? So that's why we can say that these are the first property, that they have a definite shape, distant boundary, and one more, fixed volume. Okay, so all the things around us which we have all these properties, we can consider as these are solids. So students, see, in the example I have put it down a ice cube. So see, this is an ice cube which is in the form of a solid. As you can see, the molecules are there which are very tightly packed, right? So in the same case, we have some molecules which are tightly packed here, which have some fixed volume, shape. That's why they are occurring to come under the solids. Okay. Now students, you have to analyze this image and explain it verbally. Do you consider this framework of the bones is the skeleton considered as a solids, or they are following this property of definite volume, shape, and distant boundaries, right? Here we can see this is a circular, here it is a rectangle, straight line, all these. Yes, will you consider this framework of bones as a skeleton is a solid? Yes, very good students. So this is a solid only, because we can see all the bones have distant shape, boundary, and the volumes, right? So that way we can consider that this is a skeleton is also a solid and following this properties of a solid. So students, now you have to state true and false. Solids have definite shape, distant boundaries, and fixed volumes. So is it a correct statement or false statement? Give the answer. Write it down your answer on the comment box, students. I will check it out your answer. Yes, students, very good. So it is a true statement. Very good. So let's come further. Now students, identify the name of this image. Yes, first is iron nail, second is hammer, right? So what we are going to do with these, first you have said these are iron nails, second is hammer, right? So what do you think what we are going to do with these two objects? Do we beat? Do we do something? Yes, we are going to do something from these only. We have an activity. So see, we have to hammer an iron nail. So I have one nail, you can see it. So I'm going to taking a cardboard to hammer. So at present I don't have hammer, so I'm going to use such substance, so it helped me to hammer that. Okay, so this is iron nail. I'm going to hammering that. So students, do you think that whenever we hammer an iron nail, do it breaking down, or yes, it is breaking down or not? I've hammered for seconds, but it is doesn't breaking down, right? So students, whenever I pull it, let me pull it, is it break it down? No, it is not breaking down. When I drop it from a such height, again it does not break it down, it still remains the same. Okay, and for the second case, students, what do you think? If I have a notebook, okay, I have a book for me. So if I try to compress by applying some force, so it is compressing, yes, and it's changing its shape, yes. Whenever I pull it from the upper, so its shape changes, but when you compress very tightly force, then it changes, right? But for in the case of iron nail, whenever you beat, whenever you throw from a higher height, it never do it, right? Whenever you pull it, drop, or hammer it, still iron nail remain the same. But in case of book, whenever you compress, whenever you apply some force, is try to bend it out. Why it is happening, students? For the iron nail, it is doesn't happening. Whenever I compress or I just do something, but nothing is happen with it. So what is the reason for the solids? Do you consider this notebook and the iron nail is act as a solids? Yes. Yes, students, very good. So these are also solid, students. Okay, these are the solids only. Notebook, iron nail. So these are the no solids, but they are considering under some properties. Why this iron nail doesn't changes whenever I beat, drop, or compress, or pull it out, push it out? Why it is not changing its shape, right? And for the notebook case, if I compress it tightly, its shape is going to be changes, right? If I bend it out, again it changes the shapes. Why it is happening? Why it is considered? Yes, students, basically we are going to discuss now the second property of a solid, which is solids are rigid. So let me write it down on the whiteboard. What is that property? Solids are rigid. So let's see what are rigid and how you can define solids are rigid, right? Solids have a tendency to maintain their shape when subjected to outside force. Whenever you give a force, outside force, whenever I beat this iron nail, it is this is an outside force. I'm giving outside force to this iron nail with the help of some substance. So it doesn't, yes, it maintains its own shape. It does not changes its shape. Whenever at the high I will beat it up, but it will not going to change its shape because they are very rigid. Okay, so solids may break it down under force, but it is difficult to change their shape. So that's why they are rigid. So we consider this iron nail under the condition of a rigid. This is a property of a solid. They are called rigid. Okay. So let's do coming part, students. Now you have to list some examples of solids you observe while going from home to school, which are rigid or incompressible. Yes, rigid are there, but they are compressible. Yes, whenever you go to from your home to school, where do you see that they are rigid, but they are also. So students, do you consider this notebook is a rigid and compressible? Compressible means whenever you give any force to any substance, any body, its shape get changes, right? But it is solid. What is that? Yes. Whenever you go to your school, you find it out very different solid rigid items, right? So there we have a notebook, right, eraser, and if we go about from home to school, we are talking about tree, train, bus, right? So they are rigid also, right? So I have pasted one car. Is it a rigid? And whenever you beat it up, it goes to compress. So now students, you have to encircle the most rigid article. So read this sentence and the options and write it down your answer in the comment box. Yes, students. What do you find? Pencil, rubber, and mountain. Which one is more rigid? Yes, very good. So we have a mountain is a very most rigid. Okay, so students, why? My question is to you, why? Because you know, whenever it is, they have a tendency to maintain the same position after you press such a large force upon it, but they are most rigid if we talk about from these three, because pencil, it goes to break it down when you compress or pull it out, or breaking it down. In rubber also. So students, what do you think, which is the least rigid article in this? Least rigid, yes, least rigid is rubber. Then students, we have a plastic, and most we have a mountain. Okay, so we have these articles. Now students, identify the name and tell me what are those. Yes, very good. So we have some articles which are there. First is rubber band, right? So these are the rubber bands I have also. See, these are the rubber bands, right? I have. And second, which you can see, is a rubber band. First we have. Second we have a sponge, right? So which color is there? Circle it out. Let me circle, make a triangle for you. So this green color I have taken, right? Sponge. So this is a sponge. You are thinking, ma'am, why you are showing us rubber bands, sponges? Why, ma'am? It's okay, students. I'm going to tell you why I've shown you these. So students, we have an activity. Does the rubber band changes its shape on stretching? So you have to tell me. So this is the rubber bands. These are the rubber bands. I'm going to stretch it out. So if whenever you stretch it out, does the rubber band changes its shape? Yes? What do you think? Yes, it changes shape. But when we leave it, it remains to our own position. Right? What about the sponge? Yes? Whenever we take sponge, we can say they are easily compressible. Right? It is a solid, right? And they are easily compressible. So why it is happening? Why they are compressible? Yes? Let's see why. So basically students, a rubber band changes the shape under some force. Okay, so let's see what kind of force. It regains its same shape when we remove the force. So this is at a state of rest. I have not applied any force. When I have applied some force, it changes its shape, but when I leave it, it regains its own shape. So whenever you remove any force, they comes to its your own position. And if we apply excessive force, so it's try to be broken down. So it is, look it carefully that how much force you have to apply for this, right? And what about for the sponge? As in the sponge, we can see that students, we have a minute particles, right? So I can see that the sponge is there, which have minute gaps are there. Okay, so why they are having minute gaps? So basically students, these minute holes are there in which air get trapped. So whenever you press it, the air which goes to expel it out, and we are able to compress. Okay, so that's why we able to compress whenever we have some air, minute holes into it. So whenever there's some minute holes, say there's some air, whenever you compress it, the air is coming outward. So that way it able to you compress it out. Okay, yes students. Now students, you have to think about it. What about the sugar and salt, when we kept in different jar, these take the shape of the jar only, right? So are they also solid or they are different? See, one jar is there in which we have a sugar cubes, right? So what do you think, if we take salt or sugar, they are also solids or another state of matter or liquid or gas? Yes, you are correct, as they are also solids. But why? Whenever you take the shape, they have their own shape. Students, sugar cubes or salt are very minute particles. So whenever you add into a container, they occupies their all this space. Then we say that the container shape has been taken out by sugar and salt. Okay, so let's see, the shape of each individual sugar or salt crystals are very fun remains fixed. Whether we take it in our hand, it is put it in a plate or in a put in jar, they are also solid. So they are very small one, right? So whenever you take it out into, they take the shape of a container. So that's why we act as they are a solid. Okay. So let's see next. So students, you have to give me the answer. Solids has ya have definite shape, distant boundaries, fixed volumes, yeah, all of these. So what is your answer for it? Yes, give it your answer in the comment box. From there I will check it out your answer. Yes, very good. So as you can say, we have just studied, they have definite shape, distant boundaries, fixed volume. So all of these is a correct answer. Okay, so students, let's recap what we have discussed today. Okay, so we have discussed today the properties of solid state, right, in which we discuss about the definite shape and fixed boundaries. So definite shapes, like discuss about the scale, have definite shape and distant fixed boundaries, right? If I talk about fixed volume, so this is also a fixed shape, fixed boundaries, and it has in some fixed volume. So this is also comes under rigid and compressible. So we can say that this is rigid also but compressible also, right? If I talk about students, the example you have to give me that the object which is rigid but not compressible. So what is that? Yes, this is iron nail. Iron nail is those which is rigid but not compressible, right? Okay students, so these are the two homework questions. Okay, why do we prefer doors and bed made up of wood or any strong material? You have to give me the answer. You have to write it down a block on properties of state matter. Okay, solid state, in which how many words? 150 200 words. You have to use the idea which the activities we have performed. Okay, you can use in the blog only. At the last we have an activity. You have to identify at least some articles which are solids and sketch the shape above in your notebook and observe. Fill the observation table given below. Name of the object. So what you have to come to do into it, let me explain it. So you need to write it down firstly, its name. Okay, then definite shape is it there, distant boundary is there, fixed volume or there, or it is rigid and compressible. So you have to give the answer for these properties, that distinct shape, distinct boundaries, fixed volume, is it rigid or compressible or not. So those objects you identify from your home. So you have to give the answer with the first, you have to write it down the name and you have to draw the sketches also.